My name is Harper Lane. I'm 18 years old, and on my birthday, I unboxed a trap disguised as a gift. The living room smelled of store-bought frosting and cheap candles, the kind that sputtered more smoke than flame. My parents sat across the table, faces stiff with pride, while Mason leaned back in his chair, arms folded, a smirk carved into his face like he already knew the punchline. I tore the shiny paper, my fingers trembling with something that felt like hope. A silver laptop gleamed under the dim kitchen light, but when I lifted the lid, scratches glared back at me. My blood went cold. I didn't cry. I didn't thank them. I simply stared already, hearing the echo of a thought: they weren't giving me a gift, they were setting me up. Before I go any further, I want you to do something for me. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read them all, even the late night ones. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit like and subscribe. Stories like this one, they don't get told at dinner tables. They get buried, whispered, erased. But not here. Here you and I drag them into the light. Stay with me because it only gets darker from here. I didn't come into the world expecting much. Maybe that sounds cynical for someone barely 18, but you'd think the same if you'd grown up like me, always. Secondhand, always afterthought. One of my earliest memories is sitting at the long wooden dining table, the varnish worn thin from years of elbows and spilled milk. I was 7. Mason was 11. Mom had made pork chops, the kind that filled the whole house with the smell of grease and garlic. I remember watching the steam rise as she slid the juiciest piece onto his plate, then another and another. When she finally turned to me, she laid down a thin slice of meat so dry it cracked when my fork touched it. Mason grinned, chewing loud grease shining on his lips. I swallowed hard and pretended not to notice, but I did. I always did. The pattern repeated in every season of my childhood. At 10, I stood in our driveway on a summer afternoon, staring at the brand new mountain bike gleaming in the sun. It was bright red with racing stripes and handlebars that squeaked with promise. Mason hopped on pedaling circles around me while Dad clapped and cheered like his son had just won the Tour de France. A year later, when my birthday came, they rolled out Mason's old bike. The red paint chipped the tires, still caked with last autumn's mud. They tied a blue ribbon to the handlebars and called it new. My friends from school clapped politely. I smiled, but inside I wanted to scream. That was the first time I learned to fake gratitude. School was no escape. In 8th grade, I won a statewide writing contest. My essay about the smell of rain on hot asphalt got published in a student anthology. The school threw a little ceremony, nothing big, just a line of kids holding certificates while parents snapped pictures. I spotted Mom and Dad in the crowd cameras ready. For a moment, pride bloomed in me. But when the ceremony ended, they didn't come over. Instead, they rushed outside to catch Mason kicking a soccer ball with his friends. The only photo I have of that day is blurry me holding my certificate, looking past the lens toward parents who weren't there. Holidays made the wound deeper. Christmas at the Lane house was practically Mason's coronation. One year, he tore through wrapping paper to reveal a brand new gaming console. His shout of triumph filled the room. Mom clapped. Dad laughed. When it was my turn, I opened a small box to find a self-help book with a smiling woman on the cover, How to Be More Positive. I remember the words burning on the page, like even my gifts were reminders of how I wasn't enough. By the time I was 15, I'd stopped expecting anything better. That's when I stumbled across something that changed everything. I'd come home early from school, the house silent, except for the hum of the fridge. I wandered into the den and found Mom's purse tipped over on the couch. A stack of envelopes spilled out, and curiosity got the better of me. That's when I saw it, a credit card statement with my name printed bold at the top. Authorized user Harper Lane. My stomach flipped. I didn't even have a bank account, let alone a credit card. The balance due was over $1,000. Later that night, I asked Mom about it. She waved me off, said, "It's just easier this way. I'll pay it down. Don't overthink." I didn't argue, but that night I scanned the statement at the library and saved it under a secret folder in my email. That was when I started documenting everything. High school blurred by after that. Mason dropped out of college around the time I started junior year. He called it finding himself, but everyone knew he was living off side hustles. I'd overhear him in the kitchen bragging about clients, about crypto investments, about making money from nothing. Dad nodded along, eyes glowing with pride, as if Mason was some financial prodigy. I knew better. I'd seen the look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching greedy Twitchy too fast. Thanksgiving last year was when the unease hardened into certainty. The whole family gathered in the dining room. Mason stood at the head of the table carving turkey like he was hosting, not visiting. Between bites, he boasted about doubling someone's savings in 3 weeks. Mom laughed too loud. Dad clinked his glass against Mason's and said, "That's my boy." No one asked what I'd been up to or how my part-time job at River Pages helped me save for community college. I chewed my dry stuffing and felt invisible. River Pages became my refuge. The little bookstore smelled of dust and espresso grounds, the hum of the old neon sign buzzing outside. I stacked shelves, rang up paperbacks, wiped counters. It wasn't glamorous, but at least there I wasn't Mason's shadow. Zoe, my coworker, treated me like I mattered. She'd slip me free bookmarks and say, "You should be the one writing novels, not just selling them." Those words carried me through nights when I lay awake listening to Mason clacking away on his laptop in the next room door locked like Fort Knox. What I didn't realize then was how all these moments, the dry pork chops, the muddy bike, the self-help book, the secret credit card, were laying bricks in a wall I'd eventually crash against. Each slight felt small on its own, but together they built the story of my life. Second best secondhand, second always. I didn't know it back then, but every detail I stored away would come back to haunt me. The summer before my 18th birthday, Willow Creek baked under a heat wave. The pavement shimmered, cicadas droned in the trees, and every evening the air smelled like cut grass and charcoal from neighbors' grills. At our house, the atmosphere was different, thicker, heavier, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mason had started showing up more often, striding in like he owned the place. He carried that silver laptop everywhere, tucked under his arm like a crown jewel. I watched him from the staircase one evening, the air conditioner rattling above my head. He dropped his bag on the couch and headed straight to his old room. Mom followed close, whispering eyes darting like they were hiding something. The door shut. Hours passed. I could hear keys clicking, low murmurs, then laughter. A bitter laugh, the kind that tells you someone just got away with something. I went back to my room and pulled out the folder I kept hidden in the back of my dresser. Inside were the artifacts of my life, that blurry photo from the writing contest, the credit card statement with my name, a receipt from the pawn shop where Mason once sold my iPod, claiming Dad told him it was family property. Each piece was proof, but proof of what? At 15, I wasn't sure. At 17, I was beginning to understand. They weren't just careless. They were complicit. By then, I had learned to live on scraps of validation. Zoe at the bookstore became my lifeline. On slow afternoons, we'd lean against the counter sipping lukewarm coffee. She'd say things like, "Your family doesn't get it, Harper. You've got this sharpness they can't touch." I wanted to believe her. I clung to her words the way some people cling to prayer. Then came graduation. The whole class filed into the gym caps and gowns, swishing the smell of fresh-cut roses from proud parents filling the air. I spotted Mom and Dad in the bleachers, clapping politely, but when Mason strolled in halfway through, no cap, no gown, just jeans, and that smug grin, their faces lit up like Christmas lights. They waved at him. They didn't even notice when I walked to the stage and shook the principal's hand. My diploma felt weightless. That night, I sat on the back porch under the buzzing yellow bulb, listening to crickets. Mason leaned against the railing, scrolling on his phone. "Congrats, kid," he muttered, eyes never leaving the screen. I wanted to throw the diploma at his feet and scream, "Do you even know what it's like to earn something on your own?" But I didn't. I just folded the paper and tucked it away, as summer dragged on the air between us, grew brittle. Mason bragged louder about his business. Mom's smile got tighter. Dad's silence stretched longer. I picked up extra shifts at River Pages, pretending I was saving for textbooks, but really just buying time. Every dollar in my savings account felt like a brick in a wall I was building between me and them. One July afternoon, I walked home from work, the sky boiling with storm clouds. Thunder rolled as I reached the porch. Inside, voices clashed. Mom's hiss, Dad's rumble, Mason's smug tone. I froze with my hand on the doorknob. She won't even notice, Mason said, voice sharp. She's not stupid, Mason, Mom snapped. Relax. Dad cut in. She's 18 soon. If anything happens, it's on her record, not ours. The words landed heavy in my chest. I didn't know what they were talking about then, but the chill that spread through me was unmistakable. Like I'd just brushed against the edge of a knife. I crept upstairs before they saw me. In my room, I sat on the bed, heart-racing, palms damp. Out the window, rain broke loose, slamming the roof, streaking the glass. Each drop sounded like a countdown. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia. Maybe they were arguing about bills. Maybe Mason was in trouble again. But deep down, I knew better. My whole life had been training for this reading, the looks, the silences, the shifting smiles. Something was coming, and I was the target. That night, lightning split the sky, lighting the whole room in blue-white flashes. I stared at my ceiling, replaying every slight, every dismissal, every moment I'd been told to be grateful for less. The muddy bike, the self-help book, the forgotten diploma, the stolen identity on a credit card bill. Each memory stitched itself into a pattern too obvious to ignore. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as useful, disposable. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I wrote it down. A habit now: document, archive, survive. By the time August rolled around, I carried a quiet certainty like a stone in my pocket. My birthday was coming. 18. Legal. Adult. And for most kids, that milestone meant freedom celebration, maybe a car or a party. For me, it meant risk. Responsibility I hadn't asked for. I didn't know the shape of the betrayal yet, but I felt its shadow stretching toward me. Labor Day weekend loomed, the air sticky with humidity, the sky low and gray. The Lane house smelled of frosting again, candles waiting on the counter, a box wrapped in shiny paper gleaming under the kitchen light. And that's where the story you already know begins. I didn't know it then, but the years of secondhand scraps, whispered arguments, and stolen identity were leading me to the moment I tore off that wrapping paper. The moment hope flickered and then died. The moment I realized my family didn't give me a gift. They gave me a weapon they expected to kill me, but I was already sharpening it for them. The morning after my birthday, the laptop sat on my desk like a loaded gun. The silver casing gleamed in the weak sunlight pushing through my blinds. I touched it once, then pulled my hand back as if it had burned me. My chest felt tight. I told myself it was just a gift, maybe refurbished, maybe secondhand. But my gut whispered otherwise. I cracked it open again. The keys were worn, the edges slightly dented. This wasn't mine. It had never been mine. The screen lit up, and my name appeared on the login. Harper Lane. My blood chilled. How could my name already be there? I hadn't set it up. I hadn't even typed my password. I stared at the glowing letters, feeling the walls of my room close in. Someone had done this on purpose. My heart pounded as I clicked around. Files blinked back at me, hidden in a partition labeled something I didn't recognize. I opened one, a spreadsheet. Rows of numbers, bank transfers, usernames that looked like email addresses. Beside them, notes in shorthand I couldn't decode. My stomach turned. This wasn't some school project or random junk. It was business. Mason's business. A floorboard creaked in the hall. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under my blanket. My door opened a crack and Mason's voice slid through, lazy and mocking. "You liking your new toy, sis?" I froze, throat dry. "Yeah, thanks." He chuckled. "Don't break it. It's valuable." The door clicked shut again. I sat, rigid, bile rising in my throat. That wasn't a warning. That was a threat dressed up as brotherly banter. Later that afternoon, I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen. Mom's whisper, sharp as broken glass. Dad's low rumble, Mason's smug laugh threading between. I crept to the hallway bare feet, silent against the carpet, and pressed myself to the wall. "She won't notice," Mason said. "She's too naive." She's not stupid, Mom hissed. If she digs too deep, Dad cut her off. She's 18. If anyone asks, it's hers. They won't do much to her. A slap on the wrist at most. The blood drained from my face. I pulled my phone from my pocket thumb, trembling as I hit record. Their voices filled the tiny microphone cold and clear. Mason laughed again, and I wanted to storm into the kitchen and wipe that smirk off his face. But I stayed still, every nerve screaming. Back in my room, I replayed the recording each word, another nail in the coffin of my hope. My family hadn't just neglected me. They'd set me up as the fall guy, or the fall girl. That night, I packed a bag. Wallet, phone charger, a change of clothes. I slid the laptop inside the weight of it, nearly breaking my shoulder. At the door, I called out going to Zoe's. Back later. My voice didn't even crack. The air outside was cool, sharp. I walked fast, not daring to look back. The police station glowed sterile under fluorescent lights. I stepped inside, clutching the laptop like a cursed object. The officer at the desk raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you? I need to report something," I said, voice steadier than I felt. This was a gift, but it's not what it seems. That's how I met Officer Rachel Cortez. Young, focused eyes, steady, like she'd seen 100 lies and knew how to sort through them. She listened. Really listened. She took the laptop, logged the evidence, handed me a receipt stamped official. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone believed me. Walking back into the night receipt in my pocket, I should have felt relief. Instead, dread followed me like a shadow, because the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be theirs. The Sunset Motel smelled of mildew and cheap detergent. My room had a flickering lamp, a sagging mattress, and curtains thin enough to let in the buzz of the parking lot light. I shoved my backpack under the bed, clutching the receipt from Officer Cortez like it was a lifeline. For once I thought I could sleep without Mason's footsteps above me. But then my phone buzzed. At first, the texts were soft. "Where are you? Come home. We're worried." 10 minutes later, "Why did you take the laptop to the police?" "Another hour, you've ruined everything. You don't understand what you've done." I turned the phone face down, but the vibration rattled against the nightstand all night. By morning, I had over 40 missed calls. At River Pages, Zoe raised an eyebrow as I tried to fake normal, stacking a pile of paperbacks that kept slipping from my shaking hands. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. I forced a smile. Something like that. That afternoon, the bell above the bookstore door jingled. My blood iced. Mom and Dad stood in the entryway, framed by the sunlit glass, their faces pale with fury. My rag slipped from my hand. The room froze. Customers stared. Mom stepped forward, her voice low, slicing the air. "What did you tell them?" Dad loomed behind, jaw clenched. "Why are the police asking questions at our house?" Zoe hovered near the register, eyes wide. I felt my throat tighten, but then something snapped. 18 years of swallowing silence surged up like a tidal wave. I straightened my shoulders, leaned across the counter, and said clearly, "You tried to frame me!" Gasps rippled through the store. Mom's face drained, then flushed scarlet. Dad's fists tightened. They didn't deny it. They just glared, turned on their heels, and stormed out. The bell jangled violently as the door slammed. I stood there, shaking my knees weak, but I didn't crumble. For once, they didn't get my silence. That night, back at the motel, my phone lit up with voicemails, each one sharper than the last. "You betrayed us. You destroyed your brother's life. You'll regret this." I let them pile up unplayed until the notifications blurred together. On the third day, an envelope slid under my motel door. No return address. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a credit card bill. My name printed bold across the top. The same pattern from when I was 15, charges I never made balance past due. My chest constricted. They hadn't just framed me now. They'd been laying groundwork for years. I sat on the edge of the bed, the motel's buzzing neon seeping through the curtains, and felt everything lock into place. This wasn't negligence. It was strategy, a long game to make me the family scapegoat. That evening, Clara Bennett messaged me out of the blue. Mason's ex. We hadn't spoken in months. Her text was short. "You need to see this." A screenshot followed Mason bragging in a chat. "Don't worry, the laptop's at my sister's. If anyone comes asking, it's hers." My pulse roared in my ears. Clara sent another photo, a calendar entry, a meeting with clients, same night as my birthday. I forwarded everything to Officer Cortez, fingers shaking, but sure. For the first time, the evidence wasn't just circumstantial, it was undeniable. At River Pages the next morning, Zoe slipped a small USB drive into my palm. "Keep this," she whispered. "Backup of everything you showed me. If anything happens to you, I'll hand it over." My throat ached with gratitude. For once, someone had my back. Each day that passed, the tension wound tighter. The motel walls felt thinner. The phone buzzed harder. The air outside the bookstore grew heavier with unseen eyes. But my folder of evidence grew thicker, my resolve sharper. Because by then, I understood they hadn't handed me a weapon by mistake. They thought it would bury me. Instead, it was the very thing I would use to bring them down. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant, the kind of place where secrets went to die. The walls were paneled in dark oak, the air chilled by vents that hummed above our heads. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded tight in my lap, the receipt from Officer Cortez's evidence log tucked inside my jacket like a hidden blade. Across the room, Mason leaned back in his chair, dressed in a suit that didn't fit quite right. His hair slicked, his smirk still intact. Mom and Dad flanked him, eyes locked on me like I was the one on trial. I felt their hate burn across the aisle, but I didn't flinch. The judge entered, robes flowing gavel sharp against the desk. "Court is in session." It started with the victims. Mr. Ernest Powell. 72 shuffled to the witness stand. His voice trembled as he spoke, but the weight of his words filled the room. I gave him everything. My savings, my retirement. He promised he'd invest it, said it was safe. Now it's gone. He paused, knuckles white against the railing. I don't have time to start over. Silence pressed down. Even the jury shifted uncomfortably. I glanced at Mason. He yawned. Then came the video. The prosecutor dimmed the lights, and a screen flickered on. Footage from Mrs. Jenkins's Ring camera, Mason and Mom the night of my birthday. Mason hauling the shiny wrapped box from his car. Mom glancing nervously over her shoulder as they carried it inside. My stomach clenched, but I kept my face still. Across the aisle, Mom's lips tightened. The prosecutor's voice cut through the dark. Exhibit B metadata recovered from the defendant's laptop. The screen changed to a spreadsheet, columns of numbers, highlighted names. Author, Mason Lane. The jury leaned forward as the cursor hovered over a hidden tab, then clicked. The sheet expanded, revealing the words, Harper Profile, my date of birth, my email, my home address, all neatly tucked into the file as if the machine belonged to me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Mason's face twitched for the first time, the smirk faltering. Exhibit C, the prosecutor continued. A message from Clara Bennett, the defendant's former girlfriend. Clara walked to the stand, her heels clicking sharp against the tile. She looked pale but steady. The text messages glowed on the screen. "Don't worry. The laptop's at my sister's. If anyone comes asking, it's hers." Clara's voice didn't waver as she confirmed, "He sent that to me night of August 29th. Mason shifted in his seat, jaw tight. Dad leaned forward, muttering something into his ear, but the microphones picked up Mason's hissed reply. "Shut up." Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, the wood railing cool against my palms. The prosecutor asked simple questions, and I answered clear, steady. Yes, the laptop was given to me as a birthday gift. Yes, I discovered the partition. Yes, I recorded my family discussing how it would fall on me. My voice carried, not loud, but sharp, each word a blade slicing through years of silence. The judge nodded. The jury scribbled notes. Across the room, Mom's face had gone chalk white. Dad's fists clenched so tight his knuckles were purple. The defense tried to spin it. She's bitter, jealous. She fabricated the evidence. But Officer Cortez took the stand, explaining the chain of custody, the timestamps, the sealed bag. The laptop had been placed in the moment I handed it over. Her calm, precise testimony wrapped my story in steel. By the time closing arguments ended, the air was electric. The jury filed out, leaving the rest of us in silence. Mason leaned back, forcing a smirk that no longer reached his eyes. "Nice try, sis," he whispered across the aisle. "They'll never." The bailiff returned before he could finish. "We have a verdict." The jury foreman stood voice steady. "On the count of fraud, guilty. On the count of wire fraud, guilty. On the count of attempted identity misrepresentation, guilty." The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Mason Lane, you are hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 3 upon restitution." The room erupted, gasps, murmurs, the rustle of bodies shifting. Mason's smirk collapsed into a snarl. Mom clutched his arm. Dad barked at the judge, but bailiffs were already moving cuffs, snapping shut around Mason's wrists. I sat still, breathing slow, my hands no longer shaking. Mason was dragged past me, his eyes burning holes through mine. "This isn't over," he spat, voice low. I let a cold smile curl across my lips. "You're right," I said softly. The chains rattled as they pulled him away, the echo bouncing off the oak-paneled walls. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the family scapegoat. I was the one holding the truth sharp and undeniable. When the courtroom emptied, the echo of the gavel still clung to my ears like the last crack of a storm. I stepped into the hallway, the scent of dust and disinfectant following me. Mason was gone, swallowed by a corridor of deputies and locked doors. Mom and Dad lingered near the benches, faces gray with fury. Mom's voice cut through the hum of shuffling papers. "You think you've won Family Doesn't Betray Family, Harper?" I stopped my hand on the strap of my bag. "No," I said, my voice steady. "Family doesn't frame family either." Her jaw clenched, eyes flashing. Dad just shook his head, muttering something about blood being thicker than water. But when I walked away, neither of them followed. Their silence was louder than their rage. Outside, the afternoon sun hit me like a spotlight. For a moment, I closed my eyes, let the warmth soak into my skin, and realized it was the first time I'd stepped into daylight without carrying their shadow. At home that night, my new home, a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, I laid out the folder of evidence across the kitchen table. The receipts, the recordings, the credit card statement with my name bold at the top. And then, the newest piece, a letter from a civil attorney. "We believe you may have grounds to file an identity theft claim against your parents for fraudulent use of your Social Security number." I read it, twice my pulse steady. They thought sending Mason to prison would end the story. But this letter was proof that the roots ran deeper, twisting through Mom and Dad's hands as much as Mason's. I slid the letter back into the folder, pressed the edges flat, and whispered to myself, "They gave me the weapon. They just didn't know it." The phone buzzed again on the counter. Another voicemail, another accusation. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because the real fight hadn't even started. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, then you know exactly what I mean when I say silence can cut sharper than knives. My story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's been pushed aside, used, or treated like they don't matter. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and tell me if you've ever stood up against the people who were supposed to protect you. Because this isn't the end. It's only the beginning. And trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next.